I think this is the second one that touched on the Holocaust, and it's by itself a whole topic in historical, like Jewish trauma and sensitivity. I mean, it's also a very powerful life story. So, I mean, I would love to hear people's impression on the book. I think we should start in person. I haven't done this like hybrid model, so start kind of in person and then.
We can do a role model of how many people read the book.
Oh, perfect. Who read the book? Okay.
I may ask you for the future.
I listened to the book.
That's all fine. Yeah, that's all fine.
So the expectation is once you nominate a book, it to be fully read before.
Right. So there are certain different structures of book clubs, some that like will meet periodically. We try not to do we don't have 1,000 book like page book. It's like maybe up to 400, that would be the max. So the idea is that in the month and a half, we can read it fully and discuss it. The in-depth tends to be a little bit less. It's more about the general idea of the book. Yeah. So any impressions or comments on the book? Did you like it? Like even
it was,
just as,
I thought, I read a lot of Holocaust books. And,
Okay.
I thought it was uneven.
okay.
It started off, his experiences horrendous, and it's always painful no matter what. But then, in turn, you'd like to learn, I do, about the relationships, and it was like a couple paragraphs, he was fixed up with his wife, he married her. Right, what her mother said was horrendous, that they didn't want a refugee.
Right.
That was shocking to me. But then there was so many pages devoted to describing that Texas, Wilshire, Texas,
Right.
Wilshire
The
thing,
business.
that
right.
was beyond boring
Right.
and not useful. Didn't add anything.
Right.
So that part, I thought,
Well, I guess I didn't see it quite as much as for most Holocaust books I've read. I didn't see it really as a Holocaust book because it started when he came to the United States, and it's more of the rags to riches story, which is why I would have that part of Texas and all those. To go from, I guess from being literally rags to multi-millionaire.
right, that's fascinating, right.
Like nowadays, there's so many more, I think, walls up to make that harder to do. It's still possible. I think it's the story of coming to the United States. But I guess I came at it from a slightly different perspective.
Well, I think you described it uneven. I think that's good. I was thinking how it lost its heart.
Right. Him as a person.
Well, it was like a textbook, and I just wanted to get through it. And at the end, it wrapped a lot of things up because it left us with the Simon Wiesenthal Center. It kind of dropped it for a long time, and then it kind of just wrapped up that he was involved in it. And the Holocaust chapter, though it was early, it took me a while to get through it because it was just so hard.
Very hard.
And I have more images from that one chapter, like a string, how that can save your life. Whoever thought of that?
Right.
And 2 death marches,
Right.
No wonder he was just relentless in everything he did, and I guess not to get bogged down in the details, but the string, I think about that a lot. What is it that is so important? To me, it's like having 3 layers of clothes in the cold.
Right. But he will keep leaving his house with 2 pairs of socks.
Yes.
Even,
Yeah.
40 years after that. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Adele or Suzanne, any impressions on, we have someone else.
Fran.
Great. Hi,
from
Fran.
Las Vegas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
can we hear if they read the book and what they thought?
These people should be able to, I think.
You don't hear it on.
If you have their voice, you may have.
They're
them.
trying, no, one second, I may have my whole computer muted. Is that possible? Nope. No, it should be on.
Okay.
Hey, can you guys speak and just make sure that we can hear you?
I could speak. Hello. Would you like me to continue? There you go.
Yeah, I'm speaking. Can you hear me, Rabbi? I'm here. Oh,
Can hear you well.
oh, this is Adina Malka. Can you hear me?
Yes? Can you hear us back?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome. Any impressions in the book you guys would want to share with us?
Well, I enjoyed the book from the point of view. First of all, I listened to it for the first time on Audible. So I had a little different experience than just reading it. And the person, if you hadn't done that, the person who read the book was very good. And I don't know if that's part of why my experience may have been just a little bit different than what I've heard. The biography, of course, started with his Holocaust years, and they were powerful, I thought. They were just very powerful. And then going into his business and taking with him in the business the type of personality that he developed, having gone through the Holocaust, which is, I thought, what made him successful in the future. And I think that if we had met him, who knows if we really would have liked him in person,
Yeah, I was always,
you know, in terms of some of the things they said, but he was an absolute force. And for me, the later on in the chapters up in the Catskills at Kutcher's and things like that, that's home to me. So I really enjoyed those chapters and reminiscing about that. And of course, his relationship with his children, the people that he worked with. I thought the character that was displayed and talked about with his ability to be very good and kind to people who were loyal to him, and he took care of them. He never really relented in that. He never changed as a human being when he came out. He cared for people. And I thought that was very moving to me. And even about that young man who had saved his life, continued to work for him when everybody didn't want him to work there anymore. He got older, he was slower, and he absolutely refused without having to follow any laws. Laws may have changed since then, but he kept him on board. So there was his character that was displayed throughout the book, and I listened to, was, I thought, memorable and to be admired. I admired him as a human being and what he came through and took from that, his ability to get through life and how he did go through life. And also, of course, the most important thing was that he wanted to keep education going. And I was moved at the end that his grandsons and his children are continuing in his footsteps. And that was really important. I enjoyed that.
great, thank you. Anyone else with some initial thoughts on the book? Okay, so when I think about it, commenting, I'll talk about this book, I go back to kind of like a moral question, which is, this is a personal memoir, so we would be naturally talking about people's choices and individuals' actions, and it kind of is counterintuitive from the way I was raised or whatever my context, to criticize people from the Holocaust. Like, I kind of was raised of like they went through the Holocaust, so that's the end of the conversation. So I think like I just want to kind of bring this up as if people, is it okay or not, or what? How do you feel about this just in general? Going into that one step forward into his life and potentially criticizing some of the relationship he had without judgment, but how people feel about it. Am I the only one that has that complex?
I'm not- so I-
Ariel, would you,
that. But I wasn't raised in quite the same way
Mhm.
with that. But even so, there's an awe and a reverence for anyone who has
Right.
gone through the Holocaust
Right.
and I guess, again, that rags to riches that I started, I was like, mine was it to do all that, then come and still raise a Jewish family is pretty amazing. And yet sad because so much was taken away from him because of the Holocaust. You know, I can't even imagine having a relationship with your husband, like, and
Right,
it sounded like they
China.
ended up not having the best of relationship at the end. I mean, even though she still came to him when he got
Care of
sick,
him,
but
right,
they ended
right.
up living separately.
They were estranged.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I grew up with almost all my closest friends were children of Holocaust survivors. That was
Right.
part of my experience. I grew up in Washington DC, and that was so much a part. So many people that I knew were Holocaust survivors.
Mhm.
So I hear what you're saying, and I like my next door neighbor. She spoke to people. She addressed the naval thing that he addressed.
Yeah, the first one to speak to the,
Right, but
West
she did a lot of this too, but she was not as complicated, let's say, as he was, and of course, she wasn't a rags to riches
Mhm.
story. I think he was walking around with PTSD the whole
Right,
time,
right.
which I think a lot of those
Mhm.
people are
Mhm.
or did, or that happened to them. So I think that's what we were seeing, that kind of behavior,
Right.
the way he acted, yeah.
Absolutely. I am, without being able to be in the situations, I got that impression that he was always screaming and like, but then you hear the impression he left on people. And it was always, Susan touched on it and the way that he cared about the people who were loyal to him and how he really would build a relationship with anyone without caring of their start, like people would criticize him and as like, hey, you only worry about the big clients, you're like wasting time here. And this was his way of relating with everybody. So his personality was a little bit shocking to me in the sense that I felt like I don't like this guy, but obviously when you see it more deeply, it's like it's a product of trauma and a lot. But it's interesting, and I guess it takes us to the next question, which is that experience in the Holocaust what made him that successful? What made him would it have been the same? It was something that he had even before he went through the Holocaust. I mean, there are certain things that were unique, like they mentioned a few times his memory was beyond the normalcy, like he has extremely vivid memories from everything in his life, people he met, that's unique, even with or without the Holocaust. But do you think that was something specific of that experience that helped and contribute to the success? Or do you think he would have been that powerhouse kind of regard? I mean, we will never know, but like.
Well, I think you would have to look at what has been the history of all the other people within, let's say, his camp. So by and large, was there a majority of them were strivers as well, or did they give in? I often ask whatever the religious identity is in your participation, in what way does the guiding principles that are given in shul and things you read, reinforcing kindness and generosity.
Right,
And
right.
there's all kinds of very abusive Lubavitcher rabbis were assholes, and in spite of all of their protestations and whatever they're reading, the guidance of kindness and generosity, their kids can't stand the guy, And so, in what way are you incorporating the lessons of your faith? My faith is kindness, and it wraps around lots of other religious things. But the Holocaust was an experience just as if you were in an airplane crash in some way.
Right.
But then, and how did you incorporate all the other role models? Who else was part of your tribe that was a reinforcer and messenger of generosity and kindness? Whenever I meet somebody who has a large extended family that gets along, my favorite questions is, what were the messages that came down from the elders that has your family be uniquely generous and kind towards each other?
And I think one thing he took from the Holocaust, I mean, again, because a lot of us has seen it from an outsider, but it's that loyalty. That loyalty is the number one value.
I think it was loyalty through monetary, the golden handshake, the golden.
He just expected full loyalty from anyone. Like he would give everything he has. But that to me was one value that I think he brought with him from that traumatic experience, which
Kind of like Trump, huh?
Yeah. I looked at the first chapter again, and from before the Holocaust, he seemed quite crafty to get some stamps
Sure,
and
right.
forge some passports and got his sister over and sister and husband and I think another.
I think he was able to, 3 people.
Yeah, so I think he was hearing things and he started the wheels in motion even before the Holocaust. So he had a lot of tools.
Do you know how many copies you sold?
No,
Ariela, I'd like to weigh in on the issue of loyalty with him. You know, he would rather hire people to break the picket line. Once he felt his workers weren't loyal to him, once his workers wanted to join a union and not be dependent on personal favors, they wanted a union with specific benefits outlined, and they wanted a contract. They didn't want to depend on an individual's generosity. Once he felt that they weren't loyal to him, he turned on them and he hired people to break the picket line. And I didn't respect him at all for that, not even a little bit.
yeah, his relationship with authority, it was, again, an answer of his past, but from today's eyes, we see them from what we value today. We value certain institutions or we value certain structure. And it's really hard to see how he would just think they had no value in society from his standpoint. I mean, when all the institutions you respect become the end of the Holocaust, then I mean, you can see where these things come from, but nevertheless, we see them with today's days, and it can be crashing to what our values are. Yep.
May I return to that issue of the number of
It was 500,000.
copies?
I just looked it up.
500,000.
Over 500,000.
Well, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, the reason I ask, because for the last year, I've noticed this book being advertised in the New York Times review books or weekly books,
really?
whatever it's called.
Wow.
And it's on the third page. You know, you've got the first one, it's always there. And
Interesting.
clearly, unless you have sold many copies, which I'm very happy to hear how many did sell, you know, you don't have the funds with which to put in the New York Times. And so I believe the way I believe somebody is pushing this book.
Right.
It's not just obviously a good story. It's not well written, but it's a good story, of course. But somebody is really behind it, and this is a very small imprint here.
Yeah, it's not right. It's not a big.
Many times it's the group sales guy and is doing a wonderful job.
Someone's got to think. But
I
Tom,
mean,
you mentioned to me
that
that
may be
you're
their own
from
money.
Romania.
Yes. No, what is that?
I don't know.
By way of Israel, by way of.
When did you leave Romania?
I was 12 years old. I was right after 13. I lived in
What year was that?
That was in 1949, correct?
My grandmother was from Romania.
You know, when I look at Soros, you know, the other Hungarian billionaire, when I look at it's a relative of ours, the guy with the night, Elie Wiesel.
Yeah, he's quoted here.
Yeah, oh, okay. My thing is, had he been born in Brooklyn in the same year, 1926, and that he would be no different in terms of his drive for success. Clearly, his Jewishness is.
That was
the
my
key.
question.
That's
That's
what
very
Thomas said, he
interesting.
thinks
It's
the
a
drive would have
very,
been a big matter either way.
that's
Yeah.
very interesting. Okay. Because the way he makes it sound, and again, we never know and we don't know who he would have been, but the way he makes it sound is like he's beating the Nazis by being successful. That's like the impression it gives me. But then I really think that based on certain things that were his natural, nothing to do with the Holocaust, he would have been that person anyways, whether being in Brooklyn or in Europe without the Holocaust experience, but we don't know. And the other thing that the little piece of the Holocaust, which again, I don't read Holocaust books, I haven't done since I went to Poland years ago. It's really hard to read,
You went
but
March of the Living?
yes.
You
And
told me that from the beginning. Like,
I told you something, I'm not gonna do Holocaust books. Like, I'm on it without Holocaust books, but here we are discussing, but it was really hard for me to read that part because he made me think about how smart, and I think his natural abilities is what he made him survive. It was aware, like with the deficit of calories, with the hard work, with the cold, he was always making a decision. His mind was always running. It was always, I'll do that, and that saved them. And otherwise, it wasn't like a bad day. It was that was his life. So I'm like, it wasn't only surviving. It was like being clever every single second. That meant that, and it wasn't being evil. He was fair. I mean, again, this is all the way it was. He was compassionate, but it was always extremely. He's bright in making every decision. So I agree with your read of the situation. Again, this is up for any interpretation. It's totally fair, but yeah, I agree with that.
I think a lot of people who come under poverty, what is their internal language, internal wording? I'll never be hungry again, you know?
Right, that's what he said. That's why I'm not gonna go one day hungry again.
And if you look, you know, if you're a sociologist of some sorts, you ask yourself, well, how come the Indians and the Jews and the Chinese, you know, immigrants, all not all make it, and we don't have that many, relatively speaking, native
Right.
First generation, second generation, third generation.
And I
of
think
wealth.
having come from a country, a world, a deprived world, and I will just tell you a story. And coming to America is a impetus. It's something that just cannot happen if you are born here, because when you're born here, everything's fine, everybody's taken care of you. I was just showing Dave. Dave and I go back 25 years as friends. And I was the other day I was at Kroger, somewhere near Emory, and I looked down from the second floor.
The abundance.
Huh?
The abundance.
We're complaining about empty shelves.
Right. There's so much, tens of thousands of products.
Oh, just, it was just, I just love to look at it.
Wow, that's
But
amazing.
you're right, we wouldn't have, like, I said, for native-born Americans would not necessarily have that. We take it for granted.
Yeah, I would have never
100%.
looked at it with the
100%.
second,
Yeah, be annoyed that one thing is missing
Right.
as opposed to the 10,000.
Where's the cream cheese? Is it the cream cheese they should have?
That's the thing, yeah. Where's the thing?
Where's the cream cheese?
One of my snappy answers, people say, how are you? I have indoor plumbing. How about you?
Right.
I have double cut paper and indoor plumbing
Right.
at the same time. Isn't that great?
We go camping, for fun. I
Right. We can cry for kids.
Right, for one night. It was hard for me to see the way he developed relationships in his life. So there was a lot of love. I think initially to his wife, potentially as well, to his kids. I'm no doubt he loved them, but there was that, at least, I just parallel, like, personal side story. I've been going through a lot of parenting, learning, and especially now what it's unconditional parenting. It's like the kids feel that their love unconditional, and you never need to look for your parents' approval, okay? I felt that his relationship were depending on his approval constantly, whether it is from work relationships where it's okay. In certain relationships, I think it's important to have standards and approvals, but then there's relationships that should not depend on anything, and it felt to me that all his relationship till maybe the last few, I don't know, at the end of the book, it's hard to tell because I think they describe 2 years in very short few pages, but let's say in the last year or two of his life, that was my personal impression on the way he had relationships that were conditional to his standards of what it's okay. What it was, any relationship in the book that caught your eye, or any opinion in general of how he related to either his work colleagues or his wife, kids, friends?
Oh, Ariel, that was the point I was making earlier. He was very conditional. He loved his workers as long as he was in charge to dole out favors and gifts, but he was very conditional. Once they had a different idea about labor standards or something, he was done.
It was done.
I thought it was very controlling in a way. And the thing that I'm probably in the minority in this book group, but I didn't particularly warm up to him at all. I was unhappy the way he treated his wife. I was unhappy with how conditional he was towards his children and his workers. And I don't know, I was just disappointed in him. And, the book is called Unstoppable. He was unstoppable until he was stopped. And that's what just really upset me, that he let, President Reagan's visit to that Nazi cemetery, he let that stop him. Of all the times he should have kept going, that's when he stopped. And for 10 years, he stopped lecturing. And I felt like the Nazis beat him. Yep. Reagan goes to a Nazi cemetery and he stops speaking. The Nazis have got him. I just was so, my mouth dropped. I'm still, I can't get over that he stopped talking. I stopped speaking out about the Holocaust. It's just, like Holocaust deniers, like Deborah she steps up and I felt like he should have been even more unstoppable. So I guess when just for me evaluating his life, who am I to judge? I'm just talking about a book. I was disappointed. I know he was a great philanthropist and he did many wonderful things. I'm just pointing out that my disappointments about his wife and about his conditional love for his workers and his children, and letting, Reagan visit stop him. I just had disappointments about him. That's all.
Yeah, thank you for that opinion. Anyone more online wants to wait on this before we open it to the table?
Well,
Susan?
I would like to just add to that. I understand that feeling that was just expressed, but I think if we take it into context about what he went through, which I hope none of us has ever had that experience. We really don't know exactly how we would react. And I just thought that, you know, what happened with Reagan, which I remember.
Oh,
I
really?
remember that. And I remember the hullabaloo. It wasn't like it was today because the news was not as around as much, you know, it was limited. But
It's fascinating.
he was just so horrified by it. And I just try to put myself in those shoes to have had those experiences and to try to understand it. It does seem like out of character, though, that he wouldn't speak for 10 years. It was a little bit out of character, but the depth of that impact of what Reagan did, we should never know that he could have experienced that. I can't say I was disappointed in him because of it. I just tried to be neutral about it in a way because I think it was a horror, you know, what they go through is so we don't even know a tenth of it.
Right. Mhm.
So that's my opinion on that.
And the a book club, and we meet weekly,
Okay.
but we a chapter at a time, whatever book we're talking about. So I wasn't aware that this is to be read prior. I did read, I got it online, you know. They call it Kindle Amazon.
Yeah, Kindle.
Kindle, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Kindle. And now I just see the nice pictures. I don't like the pictures.
Yeah.
And if all I can tell you is, I have no more reason to read the rest of the chapters.
Right,
You have to see now if you agree with everybody or disagree.
right. Now you can bring your opinion. We'll give you 5 minutes next time.
I think that not only do we look at people's lives who were in tragic situations, even last night in the tornadoes, but you think, how were people's lives who have a silver spoon? They came from a loving, caring family with resources.
Right.
And what are our expectations of how they will make their way in the world and how they will interact with others? That is the fact that you come from a family of loving and mean that you will then be generous and thoughtful towards others. So there's no guarantee on that side either.
Absolutely.
I also think somewhat there's some just generational things, like you were talking about unconditional love, and I hear that as a teacher as well.
Okay.
So I hear that a lot from parenting and teaching now. Like my parents, I grew up very good. My dad was in the military and my mom was an Irish immigrant, and there were expectations, and if you didn't do what you were supposed to do, you were cut off.
We're subject to your approval, right?
I mean, it wasn't necessarily like that they didn't love you, but it was subject to approval kind of thing.
Well, I ask families to think about families. You say that our family has, or your family has a certain amount of time, money, and resources. And as kids, you want to get as much of that as possible, right? Okay, what in your family, what should be the ratio of those resources based on your behavior? If you're slamming the door and giving your parents a finger, what does that get you? If you're working at school but nothing in the community, what does that get you? If you're doing well in school, making a difference in the community and being loving and caring to others, that gets you more stuff, you know?
Yeah,
So it is conditional.
It is conditional, yes, yeah. So, but there is a trend of parenting that is a little bit different. That's
Definitely modern trend, yeah.
happening, yes.
Everybody gets a trophy.
everybody gets a trophy in this
That's
parenting.
part of it.
That is a piece
Yeah,
of it, yes.
absolutely. Any other thoughts about his relationships or impression on how he related to people,
Unpleasant.
even to his kids, do you think?
Ultimately, in the end, it sounds like they really loved him. They came to appreciate him. But it must have been very hard to be his.
I think he was with his
children.
mom most. I mean, my guess is they spent most of their time.
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean,
that's
right.
not atypical in the Jewish families that I know across, I mean, and in all families, I mean, so often the dad is the primary breadwinner. and especially back then. And so, I still remember my mom, wait till your dad gets home.
The black cloud.
And so,
Right. Yeah, it was hard for me to see because a lot of the motivation the kids had to act in certain ways seemed more coming from fear or pity than love. And we do things for others against our inner will, but hopefully it's out of love and not necessarily like pityness. But yeah, that's a little bit the path the kids follow seem to be motivated by fear more than anything else. Yeah, and it does touch a lot on the fact that he had nightmares and it's the work was a little bit of his refuge of like being out of that mindset. And if he spent time alone, the humor, it's the black humor in the book. There is this quote that he says in a conversation, and I cannot take it out of my head. He says, why he doesn't go to shul more often. And he said, well, God, if you take the screaming cows out of my head, I will start going to shul more often. I'm like, oh my God. Like I guess you need to go through that experience to be able to make these jokes, or it's not even a joke, it's probably true for him. People laughed. He says, like in that same scene, and he created laughter in the room, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But
I think somebody else might have said, shul is the only place that the screaming stops.
no one said that. No one offered that answer. But he lived every single day with the Holocaust, and when he was at the end of his life, I thought about the beginning. At the beginning of the book, he says, and I don't know how many people do this. I'm very curious, but he says he has 3 goals in his life, and he mentioned that. And I was like, oh, should I have a like explicit goal in my life? Am I missing in, or is it because he went through the Holocaust? I marked the page. Let me see if I find it. But
The last one is to help Judaism
right.
spread.
So the first one is never go hungry again. The second one is to marry Jewish women, have children, and help rebuild the Jewish people. And they're pretty gigantic missions. And the third one is to preserve the Holocaust memory. So then going back to what Adina Malka was saying about the not speaking for 10 years, that part of his life was a little bit, if it's one of the 3 goals, and you see it's nothing about being successful, building an empire, like that wasn't what he loved the Holocaust, one in 3 things. Not be hungry, which is a basic human need, but after the Holocaust, I guess it becomes top of your mind, otherwise sounds even like silly. Marry Jewish and work with Holocaust memory topics. And at the end, he's being treated for cancer, and with a medicine that I had to Google it, apparently it's not a very common, and there are better alternatives today, thank God, but that made him hallucinate as if he was back in the Holocaust, so it's like he never left. Some way or the other, it's so much the trauma that he had that I don't know if we can tell that he ever really left that dark place in his head, and it's that walking PTSD that you were saying before. But even from that beginning to that end, he did all of those amazing stuff, a lot of philanthropic work, even for the Holocaust Museum in Washington, DC, he did a lot of work. So I don't know, did anyone else see that, like, kind of like connecting the beginning and the end of his life and what happened like when you think about all his achievements, how do you get it with a like good taste of like how amazing it is where he came from and where he ended up, or do you get more of like a bitter taste in your mouth of how his life ended? And I wonder, because I think the idea of the book is that he was incredibly successful and positive. Somehow I didn't get that impression. And I don't know how, and anyone who wants to jump in would say.
When did he die?
Died in 2003.
I think if you have a business that enables you to make a certain level of money and you hang out in Jewish fundraiser events, then it can become a little bit of a competition. I can do that too. Oh, it was a wonderful being at the awards where so-and-so gave $1 million. I'd like to have that feeling as well. And so there's a bit of that. So being in business enabled him to be generous, but it became not a one-manship per se, but being a part of the club of generous folks.
You know, it was quite interesting because what you said, that he had said that he wanted to never go hungry, marry a Jewish woman and continue having Jewish children, and then educating people on the Holocaust has nothing to do with his business.
You're right.
Nothing to do. They were two separate things. And, you know, I'd like to think, you know, he made it successfully because of his personality. You know, and I think that some people would even say luck. And of course, he was smart. He had a lot of chutzpah, and he really pushed his way through life. That was the impression I got here listening to it. But I thought that those were wonderful, wonderful things that he said that were his true values. No
Right.
matter how brusque he was, no matter how difficult he was really a man of value. When it came to what was really important in life.
Right.
I think he achieved that. And that's at the end, you know, when they interviewed his grandsons who married religious Jewish women of all things, that he would have been very happy about that. But whether so or not, you know, I just really thought that was came full circle for him, and he had achieved what he wanted.
And that's, I think, is the idea of the book. I don't know if I kind of, for some reason, put a little bit more weight on the negativity, but yeah, absolutely. Like if we see from those goals that he had in his life, he for sure achieved that. So in some beautiful ways, you know, but I don't know, any other impression on what?
I'm with you on the negativity, yeah, that he was, you know, such a difficult person, and he suffered a lot. Again, maybe because I know so many survivors. I had two friends, children of survivors, who committed suicide in their life, and I'm not saying it's necessarily because of their parents, but I think there was an impact behind that.
Mhm.
So, yeah, something I was very familiar with, but I mean, not in the financial success that he had.
So you can see that.
I could not, I had no idea. I couldn't believe it was a bestseller. I did not see that as a bestseller. And I didn't see it on any bestseller lists. Then I watched those things. So
Right.
anyway.
I mean, I think the book itself is not really well written.
No.
If we go more into the talent behind the author, which is nothing to do with his life, but
I think the author was happy writing about the banks. And,
right.
And the oil company.
It gets a little boring with that.
But
I wouldn't be surprised, and even though they died that long ago, 17 years ago,
Mhm.
and the book just came out last year. I
That's-
wouldn't be surprised if it's not his charitable, his will, or his lawyer, somebody.
buying
They
all the
said,
$500,000 copies.
Right.
there's this much money for somebody to write a book. Josh Greene wrote it. And it's
Call your
500,000
friends.
500,000 books of this genre. It's, yeah.
Right. Who
Somebody's
reads
pushing
this?
it.
Right.
Which is
Yeah.
fine.
I would like to say that I learned a lot about the banking industry, actually. I
Right.
didn't know the difference between like commercial banks and savings alone, you know, who could make loans and who were just for savings and how much residual they had to have on hand. I actually thought that was kind of interesting, but that was just an aside.
Right.
And he
Yeah.
sued the Federal Reserve Bank.
Right.
That's like.
His claim to.
It just
fame.
shows the chutzpah again that was mentioned before. I actually Googled that law and it came to protect so many unfortunate events, you know, like the banking industry was pretty mismanaged, to say something. So if you read it from the book, you think these people are like requesting the most insane and necessary measures, and it all made a lot of sense from a just health of the banking industry standpoint.
Yeah, you know, I thought that he took them into federal court as if it were an anti-Semitic law. It had nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It was about stapling, you know, the bank industry and people's confidence in banking. And that was another thing I kind of lost respect with him about, like, hey, guy, this isn't all about you. And, you know, it's just about banking. It's not about you and Judy.
But that's very relevant in today's world where, I mean, so I grew up with a lot of Holocaust survivors in my life too. And with my family, cousins and siblings, whatever, we had a joke, like, not necessarily funny, but like someone will like not let us pass where we're driving. I was like, oh, they're all anti-Semites. Like, it's like, as a joke could potentially be funny, or like the police stop, we were clearly speeding. It's like, for sure. So I'm like, they don't even know I'm Jewish, you know. Anyways, that caught my eye a lot, because even today's politics or any sphere is like, what is the line between anything and real someone that is an anti-Semite, which we have potentially millions today, unfortunately. So it's not that we don't have them, and it's important to identify. You had an amazing series of courses on this. It has many layers, many different ways to express, but he tended to call anyone that was against his ultimate purpose in business anti-Semitic by nature, as like, almost as like, if you're not Jewish, you hate Jewish people. Like that, it gave me a little bit that impression of like, and I grew up with people that had that feeling. I was like, everybody's here to get us. And again, there's a lot of personal context when like a whole country or even continent turns against you. What do you expect? Like is when people sometimes you hear them criticizing certain very insular Jewish communities, and though we should criticize them as there's room for improvement, we also need to understand why they ended up that way. He, again, without criticizing his personal experience, I think the book called many people anti-Semitic without necessarily being the case. Again, I don't know these people, and the Reagan situation did make me think that, I don't know, I went again into a rabbit hole about Reagan relationship with the Jews and wasn't necessarily very pleased. And again, I have no political inclination. I wasn't even in this country, I wasn't even born, but there were some situations that were a little bit questionable, to say the least. But he was anyone. He was like an attorney that would come, and they were making him follow a law that were anti-Semitic. So that's just relevant because we need to be very careful with using those very powerful words. And
Then you get the whole thing, is he a real Jew? You know?
right, I mean, it's like, we shouldn't, I mean, there's anti-Semitic behavior and it's fine, but like, not because someone wants to pass a law on a banking, they're necessarily trying to get him. Not everything necessarily personal. But that was hard for me in the book.
I think we do have to distinguish. I love this country. And yeah, there are people who are anti-Jew, but I distinguish between them, they having a bias having come here, and they grew up in Alabama, and I mean, they don't know anything. And there's a difference in having a bias and being anti-Semitic, which I hate you because
No
you're
matter
a Jew,
what.
right? Yeah. And you know, I feel the same. Take for instance, what's his name, President Barack Obama, okay? I don't think he was anti-Semitic, but he sure had a bias against the Jews. Yeah, and it came out in a Democratic Party, you can't be anti-Jewish, but you know, if you dig, so, and I loved Barack Obama for the success that he was able to bring to this country, bringing the Black community conscious of their power. But they're just biased, and some of them are just stupid. Yeah, they're not the evil guys. I tend to always be angry with people when we discuss the Israeli-Arab issue. There's a point where I got to decide, is that person rational, or is he just hates Jews? I can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So the point that we made in the anti-Semitic reference of the anti-Semitism course is that you have, if there's one type of negativity against, oh, hey guys. Yeah,
You
for
probably
sure.
want to see.
Hey.
Hi.
Good to see you guys.
Hi.
So there's one type of element that is just more ignorant than hateful. It's like the comment of like, oh, hey, where are your horns? Because Jews have horns, right?
Right.
It's not like coming from a malicious place. It's coming from a place of misinformation or place of whatever, and not to excuse biases, but it's, you know, we all have biases on some level. But then there are those that actually just straight up hate. And that's a different level. It's like we in the course we called it the Achashverosh the Achashverosh persona, or the Haman persona. Like the one just doesn't really get Jews or know Jews and doesn't mind if they're gone either, but is not actually going to actively do that. And the other
Right.
one just
And has one experience with one person, and the whole lot is cast into
right.
the pot.
Yeah. They say the difference between an anti-Semite and a Jew.
Hope there's
Anti-Semite
no-
says, I hate all the Jews. But what about your neighbor? Oh, he's a good Jew. Yeah, he's one of the good ones. What about your lawyer? He's one of the good ones. A Jew loves all the Jews. What about your neighbor? I hate that guy. What about that lawyer? What a bum. Anyway, the contrast.
Right. Yeah. Yes,
So
absolutely.
you mentioned a string story, and that when there was a young man in the camp. Do you remember what the story was?
Well, the string could just hold the wooden shoe on his foot. That once the shoe falls off, they'll
You
just kill
have
you.
Okay.
And so there were a couple of other uses, but that was the main use.
Keep the clothing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, the pieces of the Holocaust are just, as any book it's never easy. But I read that and it gave me that impression of like, this is such a moral, and he would sacrifice himself for us. And then when I see him in his business life, I just had a different understanding of his personality, to say it somehow. I don't know if power gave him certain, I mean, it's money, power, but yeah, it's an interesting memoir or biography. I think the first time I read it was like, it was hard to understand. Is it the business success that make him worth of this book? Is it the fact that any Holocaust survivor should have a full book for themselves, you know? Obviously his business success is impressive, but I think we can learn more about other parts of his life than anything on the banking industry. Though I don't know if anyone wants to open a bank. Yeah, it's just talks to you about how complex humans are. And I was reading it and feeling guilty that I wasn't positively judging this person, because I'm not allowed to not have a good impression of people that went through the Holocaust. But I don't think the book was very forgiving to him. And I'm happy if that's the true representation. But I definitely had not a great taste in my mouth many times.
Well, I think it's each of our responsibility to look at other people's lives as role models, parts of their lives as being role models for, role models, warnings. And each of us has both those parts for everybody.
Right.
And so you're teaching yourself and your children to observe what is it about the thing that is working for them that you would like to copy for yourself, and what things, my daughter gets into my dirty car, and I said, there's a price I pay. I'm doing mitzvahs by bringing gardening things for somebody else. I pay the price by having my car not as clean as it could be. And so I observe, please observe, how does it make you feel when the car is dirty? And you can make the choice of how you want to live your life to maintain that.
Right.
How did this book come to our attention? How did this book come to our attention?
How did you discover this?
Yeah.
book?
So I'm in this book Facebook group. It's not Jewish centric. Every time, either for the purpose of this book club or just in general, when I think something is related, I try to put it on my reading list. What was very interesting, I had very different opinions. Some people loved it and they were like fantastic, and some people were like really not good, or well written, not well written. So I was just curious every time. I give it I think I commented with a 3.5 out of 5 stars type of review, but definitely worth discussing. I think later in the book club, we're going to have better literature richer books, but most books some are just terrible.
We all have the same opinion, but there's much of a discussion.
Right. So this was more just an interesting discussion. But yeah, that's how it's called. What am I reading tonight? Something like that on Facebook. And people are even faster than I am reading books. Last night I read, and then I Googled the book, and it's 600 pages. I'm like, oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so this is the first one. I think it's the only biography. All the rest are just novels.
Oh, what about the paratroopers? Is that looks, I thought that looks,
Okay, let me, I'm
Next
gonna
one
bring,
is Beauty Queen
yeah.
that's
Wait.
full on,
17 hours.
We have
Yeah, but
two-
it's
we have two
really good.
queens
If you
of
haven't
book.
started reading that one,
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Audible, it's 17 hours.
Which
I'm
book is
halfway
this?
through,
The
and
January
it's
book,
Which is?
let me,
The Beauty Queen
of Jerusalem.
of Jerusalem.
I'm gonna bring it up. That's a
What is it about?
fantastic book.
What is that about?
Generations
Chastity Bone?
of family.
Of the books,
generations,
I have it. Okay, I'll get it in a second. Give me one second.
how your generations can affect you.
It is the #1
That's a real
international
dream.
bestseller.
You gotta make a family tree in the beginning when you read.
Yes,
So that's
yes.
helpful to say.
Yes.
Before I start reading. The #1 international bestseller, The Beauty Queen of Jerusalem, is a dazzling novel of mothers and daughters, stories told and untold, and the ties that bind 4 generations of women.
So we have Unstoppable, which is tonight. We have the Beauty Queen of Jerusalem. So just in about 4 weeks or so, January 16th.
Mhm.
We have in February the Ice Cream Queen. So
It's- The queen is just a
Two-
coincidence.
right. It's,
I was almost gonna ask you, just move it.
I was actually, when we were creating the schedule, I wanted to actually move around, but it's like a puzzle because some of these books tie in with certain things that are going on Jewishly or holiday wise. So I wanted to kind of keep some other things. Anyway, but then we have an Unorthodox Match, The World That We Knew, and finally, Like Dreamers. That's about the paragraph.
That's it, right.
That's the paragraph.
Yes, and an Orthodox Match is not based on the few just series that have been around. Orthodox people becoming not Orthodox. There's been 2 very famous ones. There is something about in those lines, but it's not related to the Netflix shows at all.
Unorthodox, yeah. It's not the
Right.
Scandal.
Right,
type
and
show,
it's
yeah.
not My Unorthodox Life, which is a new one. I don't know if you're up to it yet.
Apropos,
Right.
there is on Netflix a movie called Unstoppable.
Oh, really?
Well, there's
It's
nothing
not
to
to
do
the,
with
okay,
this.
I didn't even know
Someone
about
took
it.
that type of-
Good to know.
It's a detective crime, whatever, or something.
Okay, the Beauty Queen of Jerusalem is becoming a miniseries in, I think, Netflix. So read the book before.
don't-
It's really good, and
It's getting famous.
it's getting famous, but it's not gonna do justice if history tells you anything. So, but yeah, it's coming out, I think, in the next few months. So yeah, it's being produced already in Israel.
What Netflix is doing is they're paying attention to what we're reading.
Right. They saw a list, they
They
run.
saw it, so yeah,
Let me see what's out there.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
so
right.
Amazon's doing it. Okay, boom, let's
Yeah.
buy the rights.
Right. Yeah, but it's fascinating. So, any closing comments from anyone?
Can we tell everybody's name because?
Oh, yeah, that's a great way to start.
Can we do what?
Go
I
around.
Names.
don't know anybody here.
I'll go around.
Start. and then we
Okay,
can
so
go.
I am. Hey, guys.
I'll move it around.
Oh, thank
so
you.
that
Perfect.
Can see you.
Hey, I'm Rabbi Ari. It is great to see everybody. I am a rabbi here at Chabad in town and the director of Intown Jewish Academy. And we're hosting this amazing book club with Ariela as our incredible leader.
Hello, Tom from Atlanta, by way of Israel and Romania. What those bio?
That's it. That's it. Great.
And I'm Dave, soon moving to Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh,
I'm a stone balancer and inventor advisor and relationship coach.
Nice.
You can join us online.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
I'm Rena Horowitz, and we're in the process of moving to Atlanta from Los Angeles.
Oh, wow. Nice.
We are in Los Angeles.
West LA, Pico Robertson.
Okay. My son is in yeshiva now in
Which one?
Chabad Yeshiva on Waring, I want to say. Near
Where?
La Brea.
No, oh, on that side of town.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Where in town are you moving? Do you know? Do you have a neighborhood in mind?
Right here.
Oh, you're moving in town.
Yes.
Okay, great.
We bought a house,
Oh, Mazel Tov.
And-
Awesome.
right a few blocks away.
Wonderful.
Amazing.
This is a place to be.
Okay.
Here I am. I'm
They all
Charna-
know you.
Yeah, I'm Charna Perlow. I've been going to Chabad. Started in the book club last year, and I never read a book, maybe one book in
Mhm.
know how many years, I hate to say. So we read the 6 books, and then in the summer on the break, I read probably 8 books.
Amazing.
My
Oh,
own,
wow.
so
That's
thank you.
amazing.
Thank
Yes.
you. I still think of myself as not a reader.
Oh, you are. You now
You
are.
officially are part of
You're-
the-
you're right.
Yeah.
That's so good. I didn't know. That's amazing. No worries. It's not service. We don't care.
Yes, okay, it's all good.
I'm Patty Gullick, and I live on the south side of Atlanta in Tyrone,
You
probably about
outside?
30 minutes from here, so. And I have a daughter who lives in
Yeah.
Reynoldstown, so I got to hang out with her today and then come over
Well,
here.
how did you hear the
10
book
minutes?
club?
Okay, 5 minutes?
I pay attention to
Yes,
what's
we're
going on
just
here. I've been
wrapping
attending
up.
Chabad services for the past 8-9 years. So there's a Chabad in
Yeah.
on the south side, so yeah,
Oh, wow.
Okay.
so yes.
Awesome. Welcome to the book club. And here I am again. So Ariela here. What do I do? Should I introduce myself? I live in Atlanta, grew up in Chile in South America. I'm a happy wife and mom of 3 little kids, including a 5-month-old baby girl. So, and I also work on my free time. No, that's my full time. But yeah, I work for a local company called Cox Automotive, and I really enjoy it. And this is what I do in my free time. I love reading. So thank you for sharing this with me, this passion.
Awesome.
So
I
yeah,
will mention also. Oh, yeah, our online people, yeah.
let them, okay, I'll move it this way.
All right, let's go around. Yeah, Adina, we'll just go around. Adina Malka, jump in. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm like Charna, like I have a master's degree in library service, and I have not read in decades.
Oh, wow.
Librarian. And once the book club started, I got back into reading, and Charna and I actually started our own little book club during the summer. to tide us over till the book club started up.
So happy to hear.
And Adina Maka, actually, I was partner, one or both of you had a really good idea for a book, and maybe you can share, which which title was that? You mentioned to me one or two.
I think we were saying The Assistant.
Okay.
It's a great book.
There's,
Do you know?
yeah, one.
I haven't read it, but
Yeah,
So
okay.
maybe we
one
can add it.
difficult
Let
scene.
me, I'll get it right now.
But the other one he wrote about the
From the
baseball,
library.
the friends that are, there's one that he wrote, one's a religious Orthodox Jew and one is secular and they play baseball or something. They have a friendship.
Is that The Chosen?
Is that maybe?
But that's second, okay.
I think it's written by.
Well, yeah, definitely bring suggestions in because we're always looking
Yeah.
to learn. By the way, I will mention, I know we're in the middle of the online intro, but you said that we
right.
took a summer break. I mean, part of it was Ariela had a baby, so we want to mazel tov to Ariela, mazel tov. And you mentioned that
Thank
your
you so
daughter's
much.
5 months old.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And we had the honor of naming her upstairs in the
Yeah.
synagogue.
Always Eliza Mera.
Yeah,
That's the little girl.
this is the first girl
Yes,
after 2 boys.
after 2 boys.
Yeah.
Quicker
I
than
can
you,
relate.
quicker than
Yes,
you.
yes, we had 5 in 1. Took a while.
So, yeah, right.
Yeah, the other.
So yeah, can we hear Susan and Fran, if you could introduce yourself in that order?
Okay, hi, I'm Susan and I live in Sandy Springs. I'm a
Nice.
retired social worker and I like to read, although I could say I'm not a reader either. You know, there's always so much time. I really enjoyed listening. So I was able to book and do a million things and still listen. And that really helped me get through the book. So that's my new thing right now and hope to continue to do it. I did start the Beauty Queen of the Jewish Club, which I started about 4 months ago, and then put it down. And I thought it was very good, but I just, you know, when I'm going to put it on Audible, so I'll definitely finish it.
Well, that's great. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Nice to meet everyone.
Thank
Great to see
you.
you.
Great to see you.
And
Thank
finally, Fran, jump in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Fran Mashkovsky. I'm coming to you from Las Vegas. I work at the VA Medical Center as a physician, and I'm a wife, mother, and grandmother, and I love to read.
Awesome.
Nice.
Welcome. Awesome.
And Fran, mazel tov to you.
Yeah, thank you. My son just got married, one of my sons,
Oh,
so
wow.
Yeah.
really
Mazel tov.
exciting. We just got back from Miami. It was beautiful.
Wonderful.
Beautiful
Yeah.
pictures.
So let's keep bringing only simchas.
Only
That's
simchas
beautiful.
is right.
Yeah.
So everyone, please
Thank
save the date. The date will be Sunday, January 16th.
It's not, we should check if it's MLK.
Oh, is it MLK?
I mean, I'm just curious.
Oh,
I-
let's
I-
check, let's check.
Let's check very
It is.
quickly.
It
It
is.
is, it's always around, yeah.
Is it MLK? Okay. do we-
I'll be out of town.
We should, I
So we
think,
should move, we can move it a week up.
I'm
or a
sorry, I
week
should
back.
have
That's fine.
checked
Probably
that.
up.
January 9th, is that okay for everyone?
No, probably
The other way.
further.
Oh, probably
Yeah,
further
yeah.
out,
it's a- yeah,
January
'cause it's a lo-
23rd?
It's a lot of reading.
So
Okay,
let's do 23rd. Okay, so let's,
Okay.
we'll move it. So everyone, please know your calendars and I'll make a note of it online. I want to send it the next email. I'll put a note
perfect.
to it.
You'll, okay,
January 23rd. So
beautiful.
that gives us 1, 2, 3, 1. I can't, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 weeks from
That's
from
great.
tonight. And either we'll be here, or we'll be there, or we'll be online and
Both.
both
God
online.
willing.
I think it was a really beautiful hybrid. We got to hear everybody and
Yeah.
everybody participated. Thank you, Ariela. Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
See
All
you in
See you
6
guys.
weeks.
Yeah, see you soon.
Yeah.
Lila Tov. Good night, everybody. Happy reading. See you guys soon.
Bye.